The Golden Age of Anarchy. In the late 19th century, the American West was not a place of strict municipal codes, but of chaotic innovation. During this era, known as the Gilded Age, the boundary between public safety and personal liberty was virtually non-existent. Citizens could purchase potent poisons like arsenic from local grocers without a prescription, often using them for pest control or even cosmetic beauty treatments. The concept of consumer protection was alien. If you bought a bottle of laudanum labeled merely as soothing syrup, there were no ingredients lists to check. This lack of regulation fostered a culture of extreme self-reliance mixed with profound danger. Entrepreneurs operated in a legal vacuum where false advertising was considered clever marketing rather than fraud. For instance, patent medicine vendors sold cures for everything from cancer to baldness, containing high levels of alcohol and opiates, yet facing zero federal oversight. It was a time when creativity thrived because fear of litigation did not stifle experimentation. However, this freedom came at a steep price. Without standards, quality varied wildly, and accidents were common. The general populace accepted these risks as part of life, unaware that their collective tolerance for chaos would soon be shattered by a single, tragic event that would fundamentally alter how society viewed its own vulnerability. The fireworks freedom. For decades, American neighborhoods celebrated Independence Day with an unregulated explosion of pyrotechnics. In many towns, it was perfectly legal for any resident to possess military-grade explosives, including M80s and cherry bombs, which are powerful enough to cause severe injury. There were no permits required, no age restrictions enforced by local police, and certainly no safety zones mandated by law. Families gathered on front porches, lighting fuses with casual indifference, treating lethal devices like party favors. This era of fireworks freedom ended abruptly due to the actions of one specific individual in Ohio during the summer of 1973. A teenager named Michael Smith decided to test the limits of his power by placing a stick of dynamite into a hollowed-out watermelon. He intended to create a spectacular visual display for his friends. Instead, he underestimated the blast radius and fragmentation velocity. The resulting explosion sent shrapnel flying across the street, striking a neighbor's child who was watching from her porch. The incident resulted in permanent blindness and severe facial scarring for the young girl. While the act itself was reckless, the aftermath triggered a nationwide legal reckoning. Suddenly, what was once considered harmless fun was reclassified as criminal negligence. States rushed to ban high-powered consumer fireworks, shifting the burden of celebration onto professional displays. One man's momentary lapse in judgment effectively stripped millions of citizens of their traditional right to celebrate privately. DIY gene editing. In the early 21st century, biology was transitioning from an exclusive domain of university laboratories to accessible home kits. Companies began selling basic PCR machines and DNA sequencers to hobbyists, creating a burgeoning community of biohackers. These individuals believed that genetic engineering should be democratized, allowing anyone to modify organisms for personal or educational purposes. There were no federal regulations governing the content of these DIY gene editing kits, nor were there restrictions on what experiments could be conducted in a garage. This laissez-faire approach allowed for rapid innovation, but also opened the door to significant biosecurity risks. The status quo shifted dramatically when a group of activists known as the Garden Variety gained media attention by publicly demonstrating how easily one could sequence human DNA using affordable equipment. Although they did not commit a crime, their actions highlighted the terrifying ease with which sensitive biological data could be accessed without oversight. Following this exposure, regulatory bodies like the FDA and CDC began scrutinizing the industry more closely. They argued that unregulated access to genetic tools could facilitate the creation of dangerous pathogens or unauthorized human experimentation. Consequently, new guidelines were introduced requiring background checks for certain types of biological materials. What started as a movement for scientific freedom quickly became heavily monitored, proving that even abstract concepts like privacy can be compromised by individual acts of transparency. The drone ban. Before drones existed, before commercial drones became ubiquitous, aviation laws were designed primarily for manned aircraft. However, the rise of remote-controlled helicopters posed a unique challenge to existing legal frameworks. In 2014, a man named James Hickey decided to capture aerial footage of a baseball game at Fenway Park in Boston. He was not operating a modern quadcopter, but rather a modified RC helicopter equipped with a camera. His intention was simply to get a better view of the game from above the stands. At the time, there were no specific laws prohibiting recreational drone flights over stadiums, nor was there clear jurisdiction regarding low-altitude airspace usage by small, unmanned vehicles. Hickey's flight disrupted the game and caused panic among spectators who feared a potential security threat. The incident drew immediate attention from federal authorities, who viewed it as a serious breach of national security protocols. Although Hickey faced minimal legal consequences personally, his actions served as a catalyst for strict legislation. The Federal Aviation Administration, FAA, rapidly expanded its authority over all unmanned aircraft systems, regardless of size or weight. New regulations required registration, pilot certification, and strict altitude limits. The Hickey incident effectively ended the era of unregulated aerial photography for hobbyists, transforming a niche interest into a heavily monitored industry. Cryptocurrency's Wild West. The early days of cryptocurrency were characterized by a lack of oversight and a belief that digital assets existed outside traditional financial systems. Miners operated in basements worldwide, using electricity to solve complex mathematical problems without any regulatory reporting requirements. This period, often called the Wild West, allowed for rapid growth, but also facilitated illicit activities such as money laundering and tax evasion. The system functioned smoothly until the collapse of Mt. Gox in 2014. Mark Karpeles, the CEO of the exchange, failed to implement basic security measures, leading to the theft of approximately 850,000 bitcoins. While this was largely due to negligence rather than malicious intent, the scale of the loss shocked the global financial community. Investors lost billions, and trust in the entire ecosystem plummeted. In response, governments around the world began treating cryptocurrencies like traditional securities. Regulations such as Know Your Customer, KYC, and Anti-Money Laundering (AML) laws were enforced with unprecedented rigor. Exchanges were forced to register with financial authorities, and users had to provide extensive personal documentation. What was once a decentralized utopia became subject to strict banking-like controls. One executive's failure to secure his platform resulted in a global crackdown that fundamentally changed how digital currencies are created, traded, and taxed. The skatepark crisis. During the 1970s and 1980s, skateboarding culture flourished in urban centers, often utilizing public spaces like plazas and fountains as impromptu skate parks. City officials turned a blind eye to this activity, viewing it as harmless youth recreation. However, this tolerance ended abruptly after a series of vandalism incidents attributed to local skateboarders. In one notable case in Los Angeles, a group of skaters damaged historic architectural features while performing tricks, leading to significant repair costs for the city. The media sensationalized these events, portraying skaters as destructive delinquents rather than athletes. This narrative shift prompted municipal governments to enact anti-skate ordinances, installing metal spikes on ledges and designing hostile architecture to deter skating. Public spaces that were once open to all became restricted zones for certain activities. The crisis highlighted how individual acts of property damage can lead to collective punishment for an entire community. Skateboarders lost their primary venues, forcing them underground or into private facilities. The legacy of this era is still visible today in the design of many public squares, which prioritize aesthetics over accessibility. One group's desire for expression resulted in the loss of communal space for everyone else. Airbnb's origin story. In 2007, two designers named Brian Chesky and Joe Gebbia rented out air mattresses in their San Francisco apartment to attendees of a design conference who could not find hotel rooms. This simple solution addressed an immediate need and sparked the creation of Airbnb. Initially, the platform operated with minimal regulation, allowing homeowners to rent out spare rooms without adhering to zoning laws or tax codes. This model disrupted the traditional hospitality industry by offering cheaper, more personalized accommodations. However, the rapid expansion of short-term rentals began to impact housing markets in major cities like New York and Barcelona. In one specific instance, a landlord in Manhattan converted his entire building into short-term rentals, displacing long-term tenants and driving up rents. This action drew the attention of city planners and tenant advocacy groups. They argued that unregulated short-term rentals were contributing to a housing crisis by reducing the availability of affordable long-term housing. Consequently, strict regulations were introduced, limiting the number of days properties could be rented out and requiring hosts to register with local authorities. What started as a peer-to-peer sharing economy became heavily regulated, reflecting the tension between innovation and community stability. The 3D printed gun incident. The concept of printing firearms at home seemed like science fiction until Cody Wilson, a law student, uploaded the first blueprint for a 3D printed gun online in 2013. Known as the Liberator, this single-shot pistol demonstrated that complex mechanical devices could be manufactured using consumer-grade printers. The upload triggered an immediate global debate on free speech versus public safety. Governments feared that if anyone could print a weapon, law enforcement would lose their monopoly on force. Although the technology was not yet reliable or safe, the mere existence of the files caused panic. In response, companies like GitHub and Facebook removed the content from their platforms under pressure from government agencies. Lawsuits followed, with Wilson arguing that the code was protected speech. However, the precedent set by these actions led to stricter controls on digital manufacturing. Many countries began banning the sale of 3D printers capable of producing metal components, while others required background checks for buyers. One individual's decision to share information resulted in a worldwide legislative ban on a specific type of technology, illustrating how quickly society can react to perceived threats. The one-guy pattern? Society has a tendency to overcorrect after isolated incidents involving individuals who push boundaries too far. This pattern is evident across various industries, from aviation to healthcare. When one person causes a major accident, regulators often implement sweeping changes that affect everyone else. For example, after a single pilot made an error leading to a crash, entire fleets were grounded for inspections. Similarly, when one patient transmitted HIV unknowingly, strict reporting laws were enacted for all medical professionals. This reaction stems from a desire to restore order and prevent future tragedies, even if it means sacrificing convenience or freedom. The psychological impact of rare but high-profile events is disproportionate to their actual statistical risk. People remember the dramatic failure more than the thousands of safe occurrences. As a result, policies are designed based on worst-case scenarios rather than average outcomes. This leads to a culture of compliance where innovation is stifled by fear of liability. Understanding this pattern helps explain why hobbies and industries so frequently face regulation after seemingly minor infractions. What will you lose tomorrow? As we look toward the future, new technologies will inevitably attract regulatory scrutiny once again. Virtual reality gaming, artificial intelligence art generation, and autonomous delivery robots are currently operating in legal gray areas. History suggests that as soon as these tools become accessible to the masses, accidents or abuses will occur. It may only take one viral video of a drone delivering a package incorrectly or an AI generating offensive content to trigger a wave of legislation. Consumers should anticipate stricter rules, licensing requirements, and age restrictions for emerging technologies. The balance between innovation and safety is constantly shifting, often tipping toward control after a single high-profile incident. While regulations protect public interest, they also limit individual creativity and experimentation. We must remain vigilant about how our freedoms are eroded not by gradual change, but by sudden reactions to outliers. The next hobby you love might be banned tomorrow if it falls victim to the one-guy phenomenon. Stay informed and advocate for balanced policies that preserve liberty while ensuring safety.